All right, welcome to the 8th and final session of our course on Silvio Gesell. Tonight, we're going to shift our focus a little bit. Now that we've thoroughly reviewed Silvio Gesell's economic perspective, the next question is, what do we do with these ideas in the real world? While today's session will be a conclusion of sorts, I hope it will also represent a new point of departure for developing new ideas, new tools, and new forums for exploring issues like these. I believe we're living through a period of major transitions and that our economic future will not look like the past. Exactly what that future will look like, I don't think anyone knows. It could be much better than the world that we currently know, or it could be much worse. I think we're entering a period of experimentation in which a lot of different ideas will be competing with each other to see which ones work and which ones don't. The very first thing I said in this course is that one thing most people agree on these days is that we're not on a healthy, sustainable economic course. That was not a widely held viewpoint 20 or 30 years ago. But today, a growing number of people are convinced that the status quo cannot continue and are thinking creatively about what the future might look like. I hope that both Silvio Gesell and Henry George will be part of that conversation. And toward that end, I'd like to briefly mention something that Ibrahim Adrami and the educational director of the Henry George School and I have been discussing. During one of the Q&A sessions, I believe it was Anthony who asked if there might be a possibility of creating a forum for ongoing discussions about these ideas and others once this course is over. It turns out both Ibrahima and I had been thinking along those lines independently of one another, and we discovered that by talking about it earlier today. So we're discussing the possibility of creating something new, something that isn't a course per se, but more like a series of conversations that would be recorded and shared online. Since this idea is just on the drawing board at this point, there's nothing concrete to announce yet, but I hope you'll all keep in touch with both the Henry George School and the Silvio Gesell Foundation so we can keep you informed about our future plans. On the Gesell Foundation side, we'll share any future developments on our website at silviogesell.com, as well as through our Facebook and Twitter accounts. So if you haven't already done so, please find us on those platforms. In terms of wrapping up this course, today I'd like to discuss two broad subjects. The first is a survey of instances from history in which Silvio Gesell's ideas have been put into practice in the real world. And then I'd like to discuss the future and explore how Gesell's ideas could form the basis of new models which could enable society to move beyond the problems arising from our irrational systems of money and land. As our friend Joris mentioned in a previous class, the first organized effort to put Gesell's proposals into practice took place in Germany during the last few years of Gesell's life. In 1926, two followers of Gesell founded the Ware currency agency in Erfurt, Germany. They issued a demurrage currency called the Ware, which lost 1% of its face value per month. This was accomplished by requiring holders to buy and affix stamps costing 1% of the face value to the bills once a month in order for them to remain valid. This created an incentive to keep the bills circulating in order to avoid the demurrage costs. And by 1931, there were 1,000 businesses all around Germany which had joined the network and agreed to accept the currency. A related project took place in 1931 in a town called Spannenkirchen in the German province of Bavaria. An engineer named Max Hebeker bought a defunct mine and wanted to reopen it. After being unable to get a loan from the banks in the region, Hebeker went to the Ware agency, which granted him a loan of 50,000 Reichsmarks, most of which was provided in Ware currency. Hebeker used the proceeds to hire workers in order to restart operation of the mine. He paid the workers 2/3 of their salaries in Ware and 1/3 in Reichsmarks. In order to assuage the skepticism of the workers about getting paid in an alternative currency, Hebeker also opened a local store that accepted Vara and stocked it with goods from other businesses belonging to the network. He also conducted public meetings to educate the community about the concept of alternative demurrage currency. The workers accepted the deal, and the operation of the mine was resumed with 45 workers. This was soon increased to 60. Hebeker also introduced a number of initiatives designed to build trust in the Vara and encourage its use, such as offering a 5% discount on coal for customers who paid in Vara. He soon signed a contract with a company in Deggendorf to provide 7.5 tons of coal per day. The initial success of the project and the improved economic conditions of the area attracted a significant amount of attention throughout Germany. Unfortunately, it also attracted the attention of the German central bank, which ordered an investigation. Hebeker was charged with unauthorized issuance of banknotes, but the court refused to allow the case to move forward since it could not identify a punishable act. However, later that year, the Reich Ministry of Finance prohibited the continued operation of the experiment, and the mine was shut down again, causing all of the initial economic benefits to evaporate. The following year, perhaps the most famous demurrage currency experiment was started in the Austrian town of Würgl. The town was suffering from the effects of the Great Depression and was experiencing extremely high unemployment. The mayor was a believer in Silvio Gesell's ideas and proposed the creation of a local demurrage currency to jumpstart the town's economy. The proposal was accepted and the currency was created using the same stamped banknote system as was used in Spannenkirchen. The town experienced an immediate increase in economic activity and reduction in unemployment. Some residents even chose to pay their taxes in advance in order to avoid demurrage charges, and the increase in public revenue allowed the town to complete a number of significant public works projects. News of these results spread quickly, and the mayor of Würgl addressed a conference of 140 municipal leaders who were interested in replicating the project in their towns. It also gained worldwide attention, prompting a visit from the French president, who wanted to see the miracle of Würgl. And the most famous American economist of the time, Irving Fisher, also took note and advised FDR that Gesell's proposal for stamped currency could represent a possible solution to the Great Depression. Fisher also wrote his own book entitled Stamp Script, based on Gesell's ideas. Unfortunately, FDR did not accept Fisher's recommendation and actually took measures to outlaw complementary currencies. Sadly, the same fate that befell Spannenkirchen also awaited Würgl. The Austrian central bank viewed the project as a threat to its power and ordered it shut down. We can only speculate about how history might have been different if, instead of squashing these initiatives, both of which showed great promise to alleviate the dire economic conditions of the Great Depression, the German and Austrian governments had instead chose to encourage them. Another notable implementation of Gesellian principles was the Swiss Veer Bank. This institution was created in 1934 and still exists today. It was started in response to the currency shortages and financial instability of the Great Depression. The bank created a regional currency designed to operate alongside the national currency. Initially, the Veer currency was subject to demurrage based on Gesell's ideas. However, in the late 1940s, the demurrage part of the system was discontinued. A more recent system based on Gesell's ideas is the Chiemgauer, a regional currency in Bavaria, Germany, which has been operating since 2003. It was started by a high school teacher as a project for his students. In 2006, annual turnover of the currency reached 1.3 million euros, and by 2015, it had grown to over 7.5 million. As predicted by theory, the currency circulates significantly more rapidly than conventional money, with measured velocity around twice as fast as the euro. These are just a few of a large number of demurrage currency projects which have been used on local and regional levels all around the world. Interestingly, while the Virgil experiment is world famous, it was tiny in comparison with a much bigger but less well-known implementation of demurrage that took place much more recently. By way of comparison, the population of Virgil was around 4,000 people, and the experiment lasted 13 months. That pales in comparison with the fact that millions of people in Argentina participated in an alternative economic system over a period of several years using demurrage currency following an economic crisis that began in 2001. To tell us more about that, I'd like to welcome back Carlos Luge, the director of the Silvio Gesell Institute in Argentina. Carlos?
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you, Josh. And since our Gesellian Institute and people are very close to Georgist, it's an honor really to share this conference with you. It's interesting to say that this experience has not been really well known abroad, and the media and the politics want to not to talk about it. So it would be a good chance to talk about this. I want to share some, of course, some slides for you. If I can share my PowerPoint, probably it will be very clear to make this happen. To share some figures, compartir pantalla. This will be better if you can see it. Please tell me. Now, in a minute. This will be here. Please tell me if you can see it now.
It's open right now.
Is this opening, already open?
It's not open, but we can see the folder.
You can see the folder.
The folder, it says Conf Henry George Quasimonedas.
Only that, okay.
Only that, yes.
I'm sorry, I really sharing this. Here it says that we are sharing the slides. But anyway, if you cannot see it.
So you have to open it before you share. So maybe go back.
You need to maximize it.
Okay. Sorry. If you give me some more minutes, because it's very important you to know this. I will. If you give me some more minutes, I will try to do it.
Take your time. Take your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't see it.
Carlos, I think what Marty said is that you need to unshare and then open the presentation and then reshare, if I understood him correctly.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. To unshare, and then I will share again.
Open the presentation first.
First.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. No, you are not looking at anyway.
Can you close the folder that says Access Rapido?
Sí.
Okay. Huh.
Okay. Maybe are you looking now? No.
No. You know what? I'm gonna share my email with you. Send it to my email, and I'll be able to share it. Okay?
Yes. Okay.
Really
Okay.
need that.
Please, if you can, Josh, you can continue your talk if you want to. Meanwhile, I will share this PowerPoint, because it's very important you to see it. It's just not about talking.
Why don't you send it to Ibrahima,
Yeah.
And then he'll share it as soon as he can, and just go ahead and start talking about it, because once I move on from this, it would be awkward to come back to it.
All right. I will share you now. A minute.
Joe, you have a question or a comment?
I do. Just one quick question. Did George ever comment on, sorry, George, did Gesell ever comment on greenbacks? Did he have a knowledge of them? Did he ever comment on that strategy?
I would prefer to postpone responding to that until the Q&A session. I feel like we're going to get off track here.
No problem.
So Ibrahima, probably you'll get it if you can confirm me. Well, then meanwhile, I want to share you some numbers about the situation. Meanwhile, we can open these slides. First of all, it's important to know that Argentina has a big banking collapse in 2001. I mean, almost all the banking system shut down, and was a big confiscation of deposits, almost all of them. And this was because we have all in the 90s, in the decades, a big privatization and globalization situation where employment rise very much and fast, and we have a big national debt, public debt, and also the credit shut down. We get into a big recession, and then since we have a system of convertibility, 1 peso, $1, people began to get his deposits out of the bank in dollars, and there were not enough dollars. So the whole system, not only in dollars, but also in pesos, shut down and collapsed. The thing was that this period of from 5 to 7 years really getting a big recession, and since employment rise very fast, the provinces, which are federal states, and the people began to issue their own money. In 1995, it began a barter club system in one place here in the south of the city of Buenos Aires from 4 ecologist leaders, just only 4. And then they begin to share and issue their money in the neighborhood. And it was so big a recession and unemployment, and all the people middle age, more or less of them, middle class, begin to issue their money in clubs to barter, and it began growing. They began with 1 barter club, and then in a less than a year, they have 18 barter clubs. Then they go to 60. I will see the figures if we can. And also we get in 5 years to 5,000 to 5,500 barter clubs, and all nationwide, and takes care about 2 million people bartering freely, directly, which implies that they have indirectly 6 million people indirectly involved because of families and this range of the environment. We also have more or less than 20% of the population. We have 30 million to 35 million people in population, and then we have almost 20% of population in barter clubs. Imagine in the US, you have 300 million people. We are talking about 60 million people living from barter clubs, from totally private money. Then on parallel, the states, the provincial states also issue their own money because they cannot pay the suppliers, the wages, and of course, all the inputs they need to work, even the companies. So each province, or more or less 14 of the 22 provinces here, issue their own money, mainly Provincia de Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires province is the biggest economy. And the state, through the provincial bank, issued notary bonds which was called patacones, which were not financial or banking fractional reserve system, because they were just only bonds issued by the bank and by the state out of the banking system. And it grew so fast that more or less half of the what we call quasi-currencies were issued from Buenos Aires, and it takes a long range, even nationwide. I mean, in the small provinces, even in the medium provinces, they use this patacones from Buenos Aires. And it was just only a small part, less than 20% of conventional monetary system, the peso from the central bank going. The 8% of the M1 monetary base was issued by the provinces, half of them from Buenos Aires. The small provinces and even the medium provinces also issued their bonds out of the financial system, as I said before, and they have a discount because the prices were, of course, in the same as in the market, but the bonds from Buenos Aires were taken into account 1-to-1, and the small provinces, they have a discount, and probably the business and the economic actors only take these bonds with a big discount from 20 to 50%, 40%, 60, 70, even 80%. But also depending on the power of each bond of each province were taken into account. But Buenos Aires province and even the nation then issued another, which was called LECOP. It's a national from the public state, from the central state, that also gets into circulation, and we have almost 80% of the PV of the monetary system driven by these quasi-currencies. And also this was public from the nation and from the provincial states. And also then you have the barter clubs taking charge of 2 million people. And these were organized in a system like clubs that were related to each other, but each of them were totally autonomous. And then they grew up in a big net, and they call nodes, and they share between different nodes in the regions. They organize in clubs in neighborhoods, cities, then regions, and then nationwide from some services, for example, buses and some other tourists or food. They make agreements between different regions. It was incredible. It was totally incredible. It depends on the leaders, and the leaders make agreements to make this happen. But then, since the banking collapse in 2001, totally collapsed, even the oil station to charge gas to the cars, and suppliers, supermarkets, even taxes were accepted in patacones, in quasi-currencies, without any problem. I don't know if you get the slides, but it's very interesting to see. Probably we will share you afterwards. I will send them to Josh. But the thing was that in 2001, the tax income from the state really falls almost 60%. And then after the banking collapse, the Provincia of Buenos Aires issued a long range of patacones, of quasi-currency, and immediately all the tax income increases suddenly very fast, and the fiscal deficit, which was very big after we issued these bonds from the nation and from the Provincia of Buenos Aires, in less than a year, it doubled the income of the taxing system, which means that it doubled the taxing revenues, and the fiscal deficit was really solved. And then the state didn't need to take loans to pay their bills. So this was an incredible and, of course, a good testing of the system to make many out of the banking system very successful, even for macroeconomics, because it was very fast, the recovery of the whole economy, employment, and the income of the state through this system, very successfully, and the economy, the whole economy began growing again. And once, of course, we have a political crisis. We have really 5 presidents in 1 month. But then when this starts a stable political system, at 1 year afterwards of this system, the YMF ask and really want to avoid the system, and they say, well, okay, we will replace all the provincial bonds with a new loan of $7,000 million, and then we will replace the bonds that we will issue by free to a loan of $7,500 million, of course, to increase our national debt with interest. And then, which is another thing very important, the economy, which was growing fast, suddenly stops, and we have a small recession for 1 more year, because we get out all the money of the system, from the provincial and the nation state bonds, which were not banking bonds, as you know, not banking money, and really stops the economy. This is from the financial system, the economic financial system, but from the other hand, from the political system, the political parties in charge of the government sabotage also the barter clubs. This is another interesting thing to take into account, because what happened was that the people was going so fast and so big, feeding these barter clubs, that the political system feel to be defeated, to be challenged by this system, and they want to sabotage. And finally, after some month, they try to negotiate some political support from the people to the political parties. They say, no, we are free, we want to begin growing on this. They suddenly issued a forgery, a falsification of these private bonds, which were called árboles, because it was a symbol of a tree, and these trees, which was the symbol of this private money from the barter clubs, were have a big falsification from the prints, of the political parties, and they issued lots of these bills of forgery, and they put them into the clubs to make a big inflation system, a big inflation process, even hyperinflation, and destroy all the barter class throughout all the country in 2 or 3 months. So everybody then gets back to the new to the banking system, that which was then held by the government and by the IMF again, and they continue working again as before. And suddenly, as I said, but then we suddenly in some few months we didn't have any more barter clubs and quasi-currencies that were very successful, and unemployment and deficit became again, although it began going better, the economy. This was an experience that makes people to recover self-esteem, employment, abundance, and of course great wealth in their neighborhoods, and a new completely social and productive experience, very successful. We have some documents on this. There's 2 books mainly here. One is The Future of Money from Bernard Lietaer. The other was Keynes and Gesell. It's a book I want to show you then. It was the first study from the relationship between Gesell and Keynes. Gesell and Keynes is almost the same. Gesell is the really who create macroeconomics studies, concept, methodology, vocabulary, and Keynes took really almost all of them, and in the natural economic order. And Keynes, in his General Treaty of Monetary Occupation and Interest, really takes it with 2 differences: liquid preference, as we talked before in this course, and basic interest. But then it's almost the same. Even Keynes used the same samples, the same system, which was very interesting. And Gesell created this new system after another economic big crisis of Argentina in the which was called the banking crisis in the 1890, exactly in the 19th century, and it was so big because Argentina has
Carlos, we
almost
kind of need to
60%.
wrap this up and keep moving.
Yes, but it's interesting to see that when we have a big crisis, system need to adjust to new measures. Bueno, that's what I want to share. If it's possible, Ibrahim or Josh, I would like to share these slides to the people here, to the assistant, to see these figures. I want to show you about the velocity of things, how it changed and it replaced from the banking system to the private system, monetary system that has no banking, fractional reserve system, interest rate pathologies, etc., and work very well in what we call the Grecian law. No, remember that Grecian law is bad money drives out good money, and it happens very exactly as it said. And the velocity of the money inside the system increases very fast also, and it makes a big acceleration of, as I told you before, of the income, the occupation, the tax income from the state, and the GDP that really reacts very fast. So that's all what I want to share. At least these are the main issues that we can take into account as an experience. And as I said before, there are some books about this, not very well known yet, most of them in Spanish, but of course you will see some in internet and in Europe now. The complementary currency system, mainly in all the countries in Europe, takes into account this experience, like the Chiemgauer. In Germany, they have almost 100 experiences. The most important is Chiemgauer, but they have many others, and they call it they call themselves as the Argentine model because of this stuff, which was a crisis, and then it becomes a solution. No, bueno, thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Carlos.
Just to finish this by now.
All right, excellent. So just to make sure that a couple of key points about what Carlos spoke about got clearly communicated. Although these markets were called barter clubs, they were not about barter. They were markets which used Gesellian demurrage currency, and they rose up in the aftermath of a banking crisis, which left millions of people struggling to get their daily necessities, and they enabled millions of people to get by for a significant period of time using local Gesellian demurrage currency. So just wanted to make sure that those points got across. And of course, it's relevant that the central government ended up stepping in, as happened in both Spannenkirchen and Virgil, and did everything they could to undermine what was going on. I think those are the really relevant points from my point of view. All right, so now I'd like to shift the focus to the present and the future. A lot of people, when they first become acquainted with Gesell's ideas, say, yeah, that makes sense on paper, but what do we do with it here on planet Earth? Gesell's ideas might make sense logically, and if we were building a new economy from scratch, it might be the best model to use. But given that we're not starting from scratch, is there really a feasible path forward for a model that is so radically different from the status quo? Does anyone really imagine that national governments are going to completely overhaul their economies by replacing conventional money with demurrage currency and eliminating private ownership of land? Hang on a second. Carlos, I think you've... Are you guys seeing me, or are you seeing Carlos's screen?
We can see you, Josh.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was seeing Carlos's screen. All right. So personally, no, I don't think that's a realistic possibility. From Spannenkirchen to Virgil to FDR to the barter clubs of Argentina, national governments consistently view Gesell's ideas as a threat and do whatever they can to thwart their implementation. So is it realistic to imagine that there might be a path forward for these ideas via traditional political processes? Is it worth putting our energy and resources into efforts to get existing political parties and institutions to embrace Gesell's proposals and put them into practice through normal governmental processes? Years ago, I heard a quote from Buckminster Fuller, which has become something of a mantra for me as it relates to promoting Gesell's ideas. Fuller said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So rather than lobby Congress or try to get mainstream economists to rewrite their textbooks, the approach that makes more sense to me is to simply withdraw our energies from those systems and start building alternative systems designed to initially operate alongside the dominant models and potentially take over from them if and when those systems break down. If we conclude that the status quo is a sinking ship that cannot be saved, it's pointless to try to make repairs to the ship. Viewed from that perspective, engaging in the political process or lobbying Congress to advance legislation based on Gessellian principles would be a waste of time and resources. Rather, as a friend and ally who runs an organization in South Africa called the Community Exchange System puts it, now is the time to build lifeboats. I believe that's the most productive thing that those of us who are convinced that the dominant system is a sinking ship can do to build a better economic future. As we've discussed, in an economy built on the division of labor, economic exchange is literally a matter of life and death for most people on Earth. If the existing exchange system breaks down, that would represent an existential threat to billions of people. So if one concludes that that system is inevitably going to break down, what can we do about it? As I've talked to more and more people about this issue, I've discovered that a lot of people are thinking along similar lines. A lot of people are convinced that the status quo is falling apart, and they're focusing on the question of how to create alternative systems that can facilitate economic exchange and thereby sustain life if and when the dominant model definitively breaks down. All of these people are trying to build lifeboats, and there are all sorts of ideas for different lifeboat designs. At this point, no one knows what the best lifeboat design is. Maybe there's no single best design, and what's needed is a variety of different kinds of lifeboats. So the challenge is, if the dominant structures of economic exchange break down, how else might people coordinate economic activity such that the division of labor can continue to function and not have human society devolve into a Mad Max style, everyone for themselves struggle for basic survival? A very popular model for alternative economic exchange is what's known as a LETS system, or local exchange trading system. LETS are local groups where participants exchange goods and services via alternative currencies built on the mutual credit concept. The way mutual credit works is that new currency is created bilaterally between buyers and sellers. For example, if I grow tomatoes and you want to buy some of them, we negotiate an exchange. And instead of paying me in conventional money created through the banking system, we record an exchange in the ledger of the LETS system, whereby you receive a negative balance resulting from the purchase of my tomatoes, which you then have to make up at some point in the future by rendering goods or services to someone else in the exchange system. And I receive a positive credit, which I can use to buy things from other members in the system. This model overcomes the scarcity inherent in the conventional monetary system. Recall Silvio Gesell's definition of capitalism as an economic condition in which the demand for loan money and real capital exceeds the supply and therefore gives rise to interest. In a system where money is created by bank lending, money will only be lent and thereby created if lenders feel confident in their ability to receive interest. And this keeps money, and through the processes we've discussed in previous classes, real capital as well, in perpetually short supply. The Let's model is aimed at eliminating this artificial scarcity. Despite their popularity, a significant challenge is that the Let's model has limited scalability. Typically, groups don't grow beyond a few hundred or at best a few thousand participants, both because of the local nature of the exchanges and also because of the trust that is required in a system where buyers assume future obligations in exchange for receiving goods and services in the present. So an open question is whether these local microeconomies can somehow be linked up with each other in an economic architecture that allows exchange to take place between Let's groups. This is something that the aforementioned community exchange system is currently working on. Another related concept that is being developed by an organization that Allison mentioned in a previous session called Grassroots Economics. They're based in Kenya and have helped develop complementary currencies in hundreds of local communities that are not being adequately served by the dominant monetary system. The founder of Grassroots Economics has developed a system that he calls commitment pooling, which, like Let's, is an alternative model that enables economic exchange outside of the dominant monetary system. So along similar lines to both of these experiments, at the Silvio Gesell Foundation, we're developing two models for alternative exchange systems that I'd like to briefly describe. Inspired both by the Virgil experiment as well as by the Argentinian barter clubs, something that occurred to me is that while both generated promising results, they only incorporated half of the Gesellian perspective, the money side. They didn't address the land issue at all. And as I said before, I don't think the Gesellian monetary reform will work unless it's done in conjunction with solving the land problem as well. So we're developing something that I call the EZ, or enterprise zone model, which would essentially be a combination of the barter club system along with community-owned land similar to a land trust. As far as I know, these two elements have never been joined together before, and I think they would have enormous potential synergies. This model would essentially be an implementation of the complete Gesellian program on a local level. The plan is to create what I call a kit, which can be provided to communities anywhere in the world and adapted to their specific circumstances. The kit would consist of three elements: a demurrage money system, a system for allocating community-owned land via competitive bidding for leases or rental agreements, and a governance system designed to be as simple and flexible as possible so that each individual EZ can govern itself in whatever ways its members see fit. The intention is that the model will be adaptable to a wide variety of local situations and circumstances, whether it be an agricultural cooperative, an industrial park, a farmer's market, or even as an alternative model to redevelop the hundreds of defunct shopping malls that are decaying in communities all around America. And the second initiative, which may over time come to be linked up with the EZ model, is a plan for an online digital alternative economy based on Gesell's monetary proposal. The idea is to create an online marketplace where people can exchange, at first primarily digitally renderable services, from anywhere on Earth to anywhere on Earth via a Gesellian demurrage currency. For example, let's say you're employed, but you're still struggling to make ends meet, but you have some services which you could offer digitally, whether it be teaching a language, giving music lessons, consulting services, counseling, tax preparation, astrological readings, whatever. Imagine a system where you could offer those services and in return receive important and necessary services, not through barter, which, as we know, is severely limited due to the coincidence of want's problem, but through monetary exchange using a digital demurrage currency without relying on the conventional monetary system at all. Giving people access to such an alternative system could make an important difference for people who are struggling in the existing economic system. And such an architecture could come to represent a viable lifeboat. All right, changing gears a bit. Speaking of alternatives to the conventional monetary system, I wanted to briefly touch on the subject of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. At one point, I thought of Bitcoiners as potential allies of the Gessellian movement. After all, both groups start from a shared conviction that our existing monetary system is fundamentally flawed. I thought, perhaps naively, that Bitcoiners might therefore be receptive to the Gessellian perspective. However, what I learned through many hours of frustrating debate is that although we agree on the nature of the problem, the Bitcoin solution is essentially the opposite of Gesell's proposal. Bitcoin prioritizes the store of value function of money, whereas Gesell says that medium of exchange is the sole legitimate function of money. Because Bitcoin aims to be a store of value, it was designed to have a strictly limited supply that can never increase. This was done in response to the rampant money creation of fiat currencies. The problem, however, is that, as we've discussed at length, the better something is as a store of value, the worse it is as a medium of exchange. In my view, the fixed supply characteristic of Bitcoin guarantees that it will never circulate the way society needs a medium of exchange to. Bitcoin is designed to be deflationary. That is, the supply of Bitcoin will forever shrink relative to a growing economy. That means that if Bitcoin was used as money, it would greatly increase the problem Gesell discussed when he referred to the mathematical impossibility of commerce with falling prices. Bitcoin is designed to encourage hoarding. That's the opposite of demurrage, which is designed to encourage circulation. So either Gesell's perspective is completely wrong, or Bitcoin will never become a widely used form of money. But that doesn't mean that the cryptocurrency space in general is incompatible with Gesell's vision. In fact, as one participant in this class, Tyler, mentioned in a previous session, there are already a few digital currencies which incorporate demurrage, including Frycoin, Pali, and Ergo. Personally, I think the methodologies need to evolve a long way before a cryptocurrency could ever possibly become an alternative to conventional money as a generally accepted medium of exchange, but I don't think it's impossible. Silvio Gesell was quite clear that he viewed the issuance of money as a legitimate and necessary function of government. But of course, he never could have imagined the possibility of decentralized digital currencies. I wish we could get his thoughts on the subject of crypto. Speaking only for myself, what I consider the biggest hurdle to the possibility of using a cryptocurrency as money is the issue of regulating the money supply. The economy naturally expands and contracts, and the money supply needs to adjust. Gesell said the way to accomplish this is through the use of price indexes. The way monetary policy would be conducted in a Gessellian system would be through monitoring the price level and either adding money when prices fall or reducing the money supply when prices rise. The one and only goal of the monetary authorities would be price stability. So the question as it relates to decentralized cryptocurrencies is how the process of adjusting the money supply to keep prices stable could be accomplished. This strikes me as a huge technical challenge. For example, consider the challenges involved in building and measuring price indexes. The components of such indexes would need to be periodically updated. What constitutes a representative basket of goods and services in 2024 will not be representative in 2074. So I have a hard time imagining how this could be accomplished by a cryptocurrency, but I don't entirely rule out the possibility. That being said, I lean heavily toward Gesell's belief that it is the right and proper function of government to control and create money. All right, as a cherry on top of this final session of the course, I'd like to introduce our last special guest, someone who many of you are probably already familiar with. I've been a longtime admirer of Professor Steve Keen and was excited to learn that he too is a supporter of the ideas of Silvio Gesell. I heard him discuss Gesell's ideas on a couple different podcasts, and we made contact via Twitter during the past year. He's been generous enough to take time to talk with me about Gesell and to share some Gesell Foundation content with his very sizable audience. For anyone who does not already know Steve, he's a former professor of economics at the University of Western Sydney in Australia, and the former head of the School of Economics, History, and Politics at Kingston University in London. These days, he focuses largely on climate change and dismantling the neoclassical economic worldview, authoring a number of books, including Debunking Economics and his upcoming Rebuilding Economics. I'm very grateful that he could join us to share his perspective on Silvio Gesell, the state of academic economics, and the environment. Professor Keen, thanks so much for being here tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Josh. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to give a presentation. There's not enough time, so I'll just quickly talk to a few of those points. So yes, I've been a fan of Gesell's work for a long time. I've yet to read the original. That's one of my sins. But I've been aware of Keynes's praise of Gesell and totally agree with Josh that the primary role of money, not just a medium of exchange, also a unit of account, but the store of value is what slows down the circulation of money. And the obsession Bitcoiners have about having their currency appreciate over time is what led to that crazy acronym they all use, HODL. I said, what the hell does that stand for? It becomes obvious after a second's thought. Hold on for dear life. Now, that's not what you want to do with a currency. It means transactions don't occur. So, yes, I agree with that point as well. And what I've been trying to do in my research, and I'd be delighted to have people in this group experiment with doing the same thing, is develop a technology that lets us model monetary systems properly. And that's a software package called Minsky. Now, some of you may have heard of that. And if you haven't, I'll just quickly give a very, very brief overview. First of all, where you can get it from, because it's open source and free. And then what you can do with it. And I'll just very quickly show what it's designed to do. Then I'll talk a bit about climate change, which has become another one of my unfortunately necessary research topics, because just like neoclassical economists came close to destroying the global economy because they don't understand money, they are going to destroy the productive system because they don't understand production either. And that's why we've basically done effectively bugger all to stop global warming. And that's going to, in my opinion, destroy our systems completely at some point. That leads to one of Josh's points in his previous part of this lecture, where he's saying we might need local currencies because it's quite likely that fiat currencies are going to collapse, not because they necessarily should, which is the usual Bitcoin attitude, but because if the production system collapses, the government can fall apart and people won't necessarily use fiat money issued by a government that has itself collapsed. So that's a bit of a background. I won't talk for long, by the way, because I know you've got about, 40 minutes left for a discussion, Josh? Is that correct?
We've got a little bit over an hour. I think we're going to,
okay.
Ibrahim agreed to go until,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'll quickly just share my screen because I want to show how to get Minsky. So I hope you're seeing my my secondary screen now. You can see that image. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. That's the website called SourceForge. If you're a computer person, you'd be aware of it. If you're not, you might not have heard of it before. It's a repository of open source software. So anything we find there is free to download, and in fact, you can actually access the code. And if you're a programmer, you can edit the code as well. There's issues about putting it back into the system, but that's quite open to you. So if you want to get a copy of Minsky, you just come to this website. It's the usual story, HTTPS, sourceforge.net/projects/Minsky. And I can't make that larger here, but that's what the text is just up the top there. Type that in, it'll bring you to this page. Press the download button. The system will recognize what sort of computer you have, whether it's a Mac or a PC or a Linux. It'll download the appropriate installer. If you want to become adventurous, I'd greatly encourage this to those people who wish to help us develop the technology. There's also a files heading here, and you can actually download development versions. We call them beta builds. as well as the source code. So you can see all that there. So that's how easy it is to get hold of Minsky. Once you've got it, you get a system that, and I'll start with a blank because I've done nothing so far with this one. I'll start with a blank window. But what you get, and I think I can make this, I can't make the actual object larger, but I can make any graphic I bring in here larger. You get what's called a system dynamics program. And that gives you the capacity to do mathematics using flowcharts. So just to show very quickly a sort of rubbish idea of what you can do. And this shows my age, by the way. For some reason, I always come up with adding Fred to Wilma to get Barney, the Flintstones. But if you want to do mathematics in Minsky, then what you do is you type names, you just type text on the screen, that becomes a variable. And then you just, again, press mathematics keys as well on the screen. You drag, when you see what you move the objects around using the mouse, you can drag an output to an input over here, and then you type in your equations. And in this place, I'm saying Fred plus Wilma equals Barney. I'm sure that'll cause some marital problems back in the Flintstone world, but that's the sort of idea. And then you change the values here. You see them changing over there. So it's a flowchart approach to mathematics. Now, there's nothing novel about that with in Minsky. There are plenty of programs that have a similar technique. I don't believe it's easy to use as Minsky, but there's nothing unique about it. The unique thing is this object up here we call a godly table. That's named after another great non-orthodox thinker in economic, Wynne Godley. And as you can see, it looks like a bank, and that is what it's supposed to model, not just banks, but double entry bookkeeping. So anything you do involving money necessarily involves double entry. Whether you're using a normal currency or a demurrage currency or even Bitcoin, there's a transfer of a promise fundamentally from one account to another, or promises in two separate accounts rise at the same time if you're talking somebody taking out a loan. So you then have this table. It's just shown as a graphic object there at the moment, but I can change that across in what they call edit mode, and you can now see the double entry table. And if I bring up a window so that I can operate that on a larger, slightly more sophisticated design canvas, you get this window, and you can see assets and liabilities in equity. And the basic rule of accounting that you have to follow even with the demurrage currency is that assets minus liabilities minus equity has to equal 0 for every transaction. So if I, for example, and this is where the proper understanding of money, and one of the reasons why we have these catastrophes that Josh was alluding to earlier, with central banks shutting down innovative things like Gesellian currencies, is the people running banks and are mainstream economists. And pardon me being Australian here, they haven't got a fucking clue what money is. They get it completely wrong. And they don't understand it. Only recently have central banks started to realize that banks create money by creating loans. So I type loans as an asset class in there. And I can zoom in by holding down the arrow key and zooming, and I'll do that now so you can see it more clearly. So I've got loans there, and then we have deposits here, and I then have the final row being the bank's equity. And if I type banks and then an underscore, I'll put curly brackets here just to make it. Actually, I'll just do straight with just E for the moment. You get subscripts and superscripts and formatting and things of that nature are built into the program. And if I have a bank loan, then what a bank loan does is puts, say, credit dollars per year into your deposit account, and you type in words here rather than numbers. It's not designed for arithmetic work, it's designed for logical work. If I type credit here, then Minsky currently says, well, you haven't got the equation balanced. You've got to type credit somewhere else. And then I type credit here, and that shows loans increase, deposits increase. That's how banks create money. It's literally that simple. Neoclassical economists try to make it complicated by saying that banks lend reserves. So I'll just quickly show what happens if you try to include that fallacious idea in this model. And here I have, you notice the plus and minus keys up here. They're to enable you to add and subtract and move assets in terms of the location on the table, add and subtract liabilities, etc., etc. So I press the plus button there, unless I now type in reserves, and that's what conventional economists think loans come from. I'm just going to type lend from reserves and show what happens if you try to show that. Then that means, well, you're going to get, say, I'll call this multiplier money, for multiplier money. So you get dollars in your liabilities account. It comes from reserves. Well, that means you've got to take them out of reserves. Type a minus there, and Minsky says you've made a mistake. Okay, that can't happen. So if you want to show this taking place, the only way you can make that model work is to say, well, the reserves go down and the loans go up. Now that balances, but where does the person get the money? Okay? You've got somebody going into debt, but not having any money. So the only way that works is if all loans are in cash. And I could elaborate that one. Actually, I'll do that just to quickly show how you get logic into the Minsky program. So that's the one up there is the banks. I'm now going to open this table and make this for the public, the non-bank private sector. And so that's when the window comes up. What Ravel does, or Minsky does, Ravel's a commercial extension of Minsky, which we're working on right now. What Minsky does is anything which is an asset for one entity is a liability for another. So having defined deposits as a liability of the banking sector, if I click this down arrow here, that will then show me that deposits exist as a liability that hasn't yet been made an asset. Well, deposits are a liability of the non-bank public, so that goes inside here. Now, liabilities will find you assets that haven't been allocated. If I click here, I get both loans and reserves. Now, reserves are not an asset of the non-bank public, they're an asset of the central bank. But if I click on loans, Minsky brings across those operations. And now at the moment, it shows, well, that operation of the money multiplier lending approach hasn't yet worked. And I can't balance it by typing anything over here because you can't. What happens is the loans go up and the holdings of cash go up. So what you've got in the conventional model is a conversion of reserves, which conversion of that into cash being held by the private non-banking sector. So the only way the model works, which is what they teach in all the neoclassical textbooks, the only way it works is if all loans are in cash. And not only that, the entire reserve system has to operate with cash as well, which we know in modern day it does not do. So this is a way of clarifying the understanding of monetary systems. And I'd be delighted to see somebody inside this group have a go at defining a demurrage currency using this system. And my expectation of how to go about doing it, I haven't tried doing it myself, would be to add an extra row called demurrage, and then you'd have a minus against the, I'll just put, that'd be, I'll just type it in very quickly. A minus up there, you need to balance with a plus somehow. I haven't tried doing it myself. I'm not going to try it now because I've got other activities to focus upon, but that's how you could then show the depreciation of money unless it's spent. And the way you go about defining that comes back to the canvas now, and I haven't shown you much about the canvas so far, but on the canvas, you can now place the flows and place the stocks that have been defined using the Godley tables, and you can add others as I showed with Fred and Barney and Wilmer a while ago, and then you will have relationships between them, which you show with mathematical functions. So I've now got demurrage on there, and I might then relate demurrage to the rate of velocity of turnover. Okay, that's so I just if I say velocity, and just type that as a entry onto the canvas, then I'd go through some way of defining velocity, and I'd have some operation like dividing or something of that nature, whatever you do, a differential equation approach, something of that nature, to do it and to define the overall system. So it's a tool for anybody who's interested in understanding money. If you're in Josh's class, you're interested in money, please download and take a look at it. That's the overall tool that I'd like you to make use of. The other stuff I'll quickly talk about is my work on climate change. And this is why I think Josh's comments earlier about building up a alternative monetary system in the event of a fiscal collapse. I'm 100% certain that a fiscal collapse, financial collapse is coming, courtesy of climate change. I don't know how many of you saw the floods in Dubai yesterday. I was in Dubai not more than a month ago. Normally a desert. It got 5 inches of rain, I think, in one day. And there are shops there's actually waves of rainwater smashing through shops in that area because the rate of accumulation of water was so great that it literally formed waves washing through the place. More and more of that's going to happen. Our productive apparatus won't cope with it. You'll have breakdown. Very few societies are going to be capable of maintaining themselves through that. Maybe China, maybe isolated countries like New Zealand might be able to survive. But I think in the vast majority of companies are going to be wiped out by this over time. Mad Max is the alternative again, as Josh said. If we have any chance to hang on to human civilization, we need a monetary system as part of maintaining a local community that can still function and keep people alive. And in that situation, the Gesellian ideas come to the fore. The other thing which comes to the fore from my point of view is that part of why we've destroyed the planet is the monetary system. Having a single form which money takes, or a symbol dimension to money, is what's led to people trying to accumulate large amounts of it. And that's what led to the chaos we've seen in the capitalist system, but even in socialist systems when they were running as well. I think we need something multidimensional. We need something which is not locked to a physical quantity in the way that gold money was supposed to be, or that Bitcoin itself tries to be, and so on. We need something which reflects we live on a finite planet. So even though I'm against the idea of a limit to the expansion and contraction of money in a generic sense in a capitalist economy, when you're not considering physical and environmental limits, we are going to have to consider them. They're coming our way. We've created a situation where we have no choice but to take them seriously. And that then means we need some way to limit the extent to which we plunder the physical resources of this planet to create forms of wealth for ourselves. And that would have to be not just in terms of carbon dioxide, where people might think we have a carbon-based currency pool in that sense, biodiversity, placing chemicals in circulation which accumulate. All these things should be negatives for any financial system that's truly trying to respect the biosphere. And I think, again, we're trying to, in a very extended way, link up the Gesell versus Gesell plus Henry George arguments that Josh made earlier again. We need a monetary system that respects the physical planet. And that would mean some way in which we'd tie those two together. Again, I haven't done that work. I'm too busy trying to point out the absolute garbage that mainstream economists have done on climate change. My main ambition is to raise people's awareness about how we're being conned by mainstream economists who use the most successful system. If you believe bullshit, you're very good at promoting bullshit, which is what they've done. So I'm trying to expose them. My ambition in life, I have to say honestly what it is, it's to be their expert witness at their trials for ecocide. So that's the main thing I'm working on now. I'll hand over to Josh and we can keep on talking.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Keene. Thanks for getting us an R rating for the first time in this series. All right. Before we wrap up, I'd like to make a little sales pitch for the Silvio Gesell Foundation in the hope that you'll connect with us through our various online platforms and perhaps consider supporting us. As I mentioned, the foundation is less than a year old. At this point, our resources are very limited. We have a long to-do list, and our ability to execute it is limited by manpower and money. Just to give a few examples of things that are waiting on resources to become available, in addition to developing the EZ model and the digital Gesellian economy that I described today, we also plan to publish our own edition of the Natural Economic Order, which, as I mentioned, was not in print in English when I first looked for a copy. Marty mentioned that he was able to get a reprint of an old edition from a company in India, but I still think there's a need for an updated edition, which can hopefully introduce Gesell to a new audience. Another focus will be increasing coordination with the other Gesellian organizations around the world, like the Silvio Gesell Institute in Argentina and the INWO in Germany. Obviously, the language barrier is an obstacle to coordination, and having some professional help with translation would be very helpful. As just one example of the relative infancy of the Gesellian movement, there's a museum located in Villa Gesell, Argentina, a town founded by Silvio's son, Carlos, which contains a trove of Gesell's documents that has never been digitally archived or translated. We don't even know exactly what they have there. So hiring someone to systematically catalog and translate those documents is a high priority, both for us and for Carlos and his organization. So there's a lot to be done. If you'd like to support us, you can do so through Patreon. You can become a paid Substack subscriber, or you can make direct donations through PayPal. We've also got t-shirts, coffee mugs, and stickers available at our online store at silviogesell.com. So with that said, I want to once again thank Ibrahima and the Henry George School for inviting me to give this course. It's been a great learning experience for me, and I enjoyed the great questions from all of you. So let's open the floor for one final Q&A session, and feel free to direct any questions to either of our guests, Carlos or Steve. I don't know where Ibrahima went, but Marty, you want to take the first one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was an excellent class tonight, and a lot to think about. I want to go back to something you said, Josh, and it's pretty fundamental. You're talking about a situation where somebody does one thing and somebody else grows tomatoes or something, and it's not a direct barter because the one person waits for somebody else to do something, and then they receive some kind of credit or payback. So exactly how are things compared and valued if you're comparing some kind of astrology, tomatoes, and what the next thing is? So how do you combine those things?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the short answer is that you determine it the same way you do with conventional money, through negotiation between the buyer and the seller. You know, the buyer of the tomatoes is not going to want to pay 1 million units because he will then have a huge negative balance that he'll have to make up. That being said, I am quite agnostic as it relates to the Let's model of currency creation. I'm not sure I understand it. I'm not sure that it has the dynamics that would be needed to keep a system balanced. So I mentioned the Let's system not so much to advocate it as to illustrate a very popular form of alternative exchange that a lot of people are experimenting with. And for me, the Let's system itself is not the most interesting part. What's most interesting to me is the idea of trying to link up Let's groups. I think that's kind of the holy grail for developing what would really be a viable lifeboat in the event that the dominant system does definitively break down.
That's good. Thank you.
Right. Wayne Looney.
Oh, yes. The question is about the Virgo system in Austria. I'm aware that I think there was a major collapse of a major Austrian bank in 1931. I think it was Credit Ansel. Did the Virgo system was the Virgo system a response to that collapse?
I'm not aware of any connection. Felix, I see, is with us tonight. Felix or Carlos, do either of you know anything relating to connection between those two events?
Yeah, I think the collapse was before. This was actually why the mayor was so successful in implementing the Gesell money in Virgo, because people were really down because there was this economic crash, and so the people were this is why they were accepting money which is not hoardable. And yes, and then when 2 years later, after everything got moved again and the economy started working again, then 2 years later the Reichsbank prohibited the Gesell money, and then again Virgo fell into a deep depression. but it was not in the Depression. Meanwhile, they had Gesell money. This is at least I understood.
Excellent. Thank you.
And there is an interesting movie documentary that I would suggest you watch. It's available on YouTube. I'm sure there is an English version. I saw it in French, but there is an English version too.
Yeah, The Miracle of Wurgel, actually. This is a very good movie.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think very accurate too. Okay, so Richard.
Yes. Josh, good job with this course. A lot of information. Anwar mentioned associated demerge with a tax a few times. And I was wondering if demerge did pan out not to work. Do you have any ideas about what a tax system would look like? A Gesellian tax system?
As far as I know, Gesell did not make any. Steve.
Just very quickly, that's rather similar to a transactions tax, where every transaction is taxed. So and I actually think that's a better idea than income tax. Because if you understand how money is created by fiat currency, governments don't tax to spend, they spend to tax, as the MMT crowd puts it. But the taxation itself taken out of income, I think is one reason why we've had such a huge right-wing shift in popular opinion over the last 40 or 50 years, because it's very easy for the rich to evade tax. It's very hard for the poor to evade tax, and the working class and the middle class tends to suffer from income tax, and that's why you've got, they used to call them Reagan Democrats or Reagan workers voting for Reagan. Same sort of thing for Trump now. So I would prefer to see a transaction tax, and that may in fact even be politically easier to bring in than a pure Gesellian currency. So I think that's would be my analogy: a tax on every transaction, and therefore the amount of money you've got in existence diminishes with each transaction you make, which also encourages the spending as beforehand. Maybe it's a good question of whether it does or it doesn't have the Gesellian impact of depreciating currency.
When I was listening to demerge, I thought of a system where there would be a highly progressive estate tax, so almost no money would pass on death, and maybe a highly progressive tax on unearned income. I doubt Gesell would tax wages, so I was just wondering if anybody has ever thought of replacing that with.
Yeah, estate taxes. The wealthy have very successfully destroyed estate taxes over the last 50 or 60 years, and they'd fight tooth and nail to prevent that sort of thing. You need something which is politically feasible to bring into the type of political system we're in. And as much as I favor estate taxes, because according to economic theory, that's what should happen. You should die with not having a cent to distribute to anybody else. That's what the theory actually encourages, because it's the last thing they actually ever argue for.
All right, thank you.
Good. Joyce?
Hello, Josh. Hi, everybody. Well, actually, just on the question of last speaker, I think last week we discussed land reform, and Gesell had the proposal, if I understood correctly, to have it have the state own all the real estate and lease it out to people in exchange for being paid by the people, and then the state hands out money to mothers exclusively or women exclusively, and based on how many children they have. So not that I care, but that seems an idea by Gesell about a tax system. I mainly care about ending unearned income and having a money system that doesn't inherently redistribute based on ownership of anything, as all of you do, I'm sure. But I just wanted to share some ideas and experiences. thank you, Josh, for explaining some more about Gesell's experiences in Germany. I'm very much interested in that history. And recurring legal battles have been part of it, and I'm not completely sure exactly what happened, but I think that a main thing that has happened is that there is made a deal of selling reclaimable money without a banking license. And I work for an organization which predecessor actually did that and got into trouble with the Central Bank of the Netherlands. So I'm sure that up till this day it is a legal issue. Now, how we solved that was by well, not selling reclaimable money anymore, but having the buying and selling of the complementary currency take place on an exchange platform for a variable price. Not a price that can rise above a certain amount, because we don't want money to increase in value so much that people earn money with money. But there is some flexibility to the price setting, and if you do it that way, then well, people have claims on each other and not on the quote unquote banking house. And when it comes to the volume of money and what is the right volume of money, which you also mentioned as an important issue, well, the volume needs to be sufficient for the trade that people can do in the complementary currency. And if you have as a goal price stabilization, then you need to follow the increased possibility for trade and decreased possibility for trade. And the system that we have is we monitor the price on that exchange platform of the currency. And well, we sell the currency and we give out credit when people want it and have a feasible plan. But when we see that it leads to the price of the currency lowering, then we buy up the currency and destroy some of it. So that's our way of handling it. Yeah, so that's my experience, and I want to thank you a lot for this wonderful course, and I look forward to discussions in the future about different systems, and yeah, let's keep on learning from each other.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly comment on the subject of government versus private sector in terms of working out these issues. To me, they are mind-bendingly complex. I can only think so far into them. And I think that's probably true of most people, if not everyone. So I'm a believer that, and I think Gesell would have supported this, that we need to put ideas into practice in order to figure out what works. He said, for example, that the ideal rate of demurrage cannot be determined in theory, that it has to be figured out in practice. So a big aspect of the EZ model that I described today is that I envision it as sort of like a human computer, where you send out this kit to hundreds, if not thousands of different people who have different ideas about how to use it. And some of them will use it well, and some of them will not use it well. and some will get good results and some will get bad results. And if there is a mechanism for sharing all of that information, then I think the network will learn in a way that that a centralized apparatus could never accomplish. So I'm a big believer, and I think Gesell was too, in the free market, not only of goods and services, but also of ideas.
Thanks.
Watson? Ed.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ibrahima. Professor Keene, you're leading me down a garden path with this Minsky demonstration. I am a trained accountant. I manage the mortgage loan department for a bank, commercial bank, and I wrote the accounting procedures. Beginning with Richard Warner's paper on how banks create money out of thin air, I've been perplexed by this whole question and have not been able to get satisfactory answers from anyone in the accounting discipline.
Yeah,
I've had conversations with people at FASB. If others know, that's the Financial Accounting Standards Board in the United States, and they cannot answer it. Do you have a good expert source who understands accounting, who has explained this whole phenomenon? Because it occurs to me that what has perplexed me is that commercial banks do not have the legal authority to print Federal Reserve notes in the United States. They do not have the legal authority to issue paper currency. They can issue bonds, which are debt. They can issue shares of stock in order to raise cash. But I am still perplexed on how a loan can be made without the cash coming from somewhere.
Yeah, okay. I'm actually writing on that right now. I am the expert on that topic. And Minsky.
Is this in the book that you've been sending out? Because I've downloaded all the chapters and I plan to study it closely.
Is that the rebuilding economics
Yes.
from the top down? Yeah. Okay. In one of those chapters, I cover it in quite a bit of detail. And the basic point that people get confused on is this whole money from nothing idea, which sounds like, wave a magic wand and you get money, which is violating not just logic, but violating accounting as well. But what you actually have is that there are, if I do a loan to you, my deposit account goes down, yours goes up, and money comes out of my account and goes into yours. And that's what people have as a generic understanding of how money actually operates. But for a bank, the reason a bank needs to have deposit facilities is that it can then cause its liabilities to rise by giving somebody a loan, and its assets to rise because of the loan itself. So that is a case where money is not out. When people say money out of nothing, what is really meant is there is no fund which has to go down to enable the loan money to go up. Okay? So that is the fundamental point. So banks are not creating reserves when they make a loan at all. Okay, they're not creating the assets the government is the only authority to create, but they are adding to people's deposit accounts, which are assets that we accept. People's deposit accounts are liability to the banking sector that everybody else accepts the transfer of that liability as a form of payment. Okay?
Well, let me intervene for a second, because my use of T accounts as an accountant, following the money, what most people don't grasp is that very little of the cash or the money that's used to make a loan goes into the recipient, the borrower's account. It's not usually a transaction that ends up back on the same bank's financial statements. It's going to third parties. When I made a mortgage loan to someone, some money went to the seller of the property, some money went to the tax collector, some money went to the real estate appraiser, to the insurance, the homeowner's insurance. It could possibly be that $200,000 loan, which came off the bank's books, none of it came back on the books as a deposit by any of those parties.
Yep, sure. No, but the thing is, and this like I'm an aggregate macroeconomic modeler. So at the aggregate level, you leave out those individual transactions. But it's what you're talking about. Let's say I bank at Acme and you bank at Bozo Bank, and then I take out and I use my credit card to buy something. I swipe that credit card. My debt goes up. Your deposit goes up at two entirely different banks.
Yeah.
And the whole function of the reserve system was to facilitate the transfers of reserves. So, and in fact, I'm writing a paper right now. By the way, I'll give it a bit of encouragement here. I would like people to follow me on my Substack, my Patreon pages, because I post on this topic all the time. But I'm actually writing a reply to a Austrian stroke neoclassical economist called George Selgin, who worked for the Cato Institute. And he's raised precisely that point and said that, oh, if one bank lends and it doesn't have the reserves, then it has to borrow the reserves from another bank, and therefore there's borrowing. Yeah, George, I mean, that's trivial, pardon me. And that's what I'm going to be going through, because what he thinks is that therefore means controlling reserves, controls lending. And I'm going to be building a Minsky model to show that's completely wrong. Although what actually happens in that case is you borrow money at the Acme Bank, you buy something off somebody at the Bozo Bank. The Bozo Bank, the Acme Bank doesn't have the reserves, but it borrows it from the Bozo Bank and pays interest at the settlement rate. And that's a profit-making venture for the Bozo Bank to lend reserves back. But in no sense does that mean the money came from reserves, which is the way people think.
I'm still grappling with that.
Well, download
The money
Minsky.
has to come from the central bank at some point.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. There are two independent monetary systems, two independent ways of creating money. Banks create money by increasing loans and increasing deposits at the same time. This government creates money by increasing deposits and increasing reserves at the same time. So there's two ways you can fuel the tank in that sense. We live in a mixed system of both credit money and fiat money. And you need to understand them both. And Minsky makes it absolutely straightforward to do that. So I highly recommend it. Download it, try it yourself. If you can't work it out, drop me an email and we can go from there.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got me thinking.
Good. That was the idea.
Great. Michael. Michael, you may need to unmute so we can hear you.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to Samuel because we don't have much time left. Samuel, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Josh, I wanted to ask you about the easy system that you are mentioning. First of all, what was the standing? What did it stand for?
Enterprise zone.
Enterprise zone. Okay. So basically, the idea there is you want to kind of like from the bootstraps, like start up the Georgist Gessellian ideas. So you have like three sections. One would be for like a land trust essentially. The other one would be a currency that would be utilized by everyone, I guess, within the land trust. And then the third would be a governance structure. I'm wondering if this kind of kit would necessitate some kind of like you would need, for example, you gave that one example where in order for the workers of the mine to be able to accept the demurrage currency, the person who was setting it up needed to open up a shop, for example, that would be able to accept these kinds of things. So would that kind of be a requirement in the use of this kit, where it would need to be present in a sort of community that has everything already available within it, all of the supplies, everything. Like maybe you could set this up within like a supermarket kind of location, or like a Walmart or something that has all of the necessities that will be able to facilitate that? Because it wouldn't really make sense if this currency wasn't accepted in key locations that were necessities for people.
Well, I mean, what I think this ultimately relates back to is what I said when I described the intention of the network being a human computer. I'm not smart enough to answer all of these questions. I don't think anybody is. And therefore, what you need is a sorting mechanism. And that's what the human computer would be. It would be a whole bunch of different people with different opinions, different experiences, different levels of education, different ideas about society, all trying their best to use the toolkit to generate the best results that they can. And some of them are not going to do well, and some of them are going to do better. And I think that a network like that would be a mechanism for developing innovative best practices that no one could possibly think through on paper at this stage of the game.
And the reason for making it a toolkit would be to kind of decentralize it and make it so that anyone and anywhere can try it out. And if some people get you know, stamped out by governments and banks and whoever like is you know, has vested interest in stamping this out, you know, there are other people who could also try this in other parts of the world and keep it alive. I'm assuming that's the idea, right?
Exactly. That's a key part. You know, if we don't learn from Virgil and the Argentinian barter clubs, then we'll just repeat the same mistakes. Another key point that you picked up on, even though I didn't explicitly say it, is that the EZ network would be, you know, a hydra. What head do the central authorities chop off in order to kill the whole thing? They could try to stamp out individual ones, but there would be others that are in different countries and different jurisdictions, and it would be virtually impossible. You know, once you get 50, 100, 1,000 of these things operating in different places and under different legal systems and jurisdictions, it would be impossible to put the genie back in the bottle.
And so finally, what would the actual form of this kit be? Is it like a software toolkit, like a software stack that people can download and customize to their needs, or what are you thinking? And like, is it in active development right now?
It's very much on the drawing board at this point. I do not have the technical capabilities to design a digital demurrage currency, but I know people who do, and I'm, you know, in communication with them. I don't know, you know, governance models is a whole different discipline. So I don't want to be the one to put, you know, my stamp on it and say that this is how it's going to be. I want to sort of crowdsource the best ideas. But what I do think is critical is that there be as few rules as possible, that it be maximally flexible, so that each group that receives the kit can put their own stamp on it. So you don't write, you know, a whole bunch of specific rules. You write as few rules as possible to enable the communities to take this kit and mold it to their individual circumstances and their individual preferences.
Is there a reason specifically why you're also focusing on governance models and like making it a distinct part of the three? Because I mean, land and money, we've been talking about it, you know, throughout the course, and that kind of makes sense. Governance, what do you see the governance side as being important for?
Okay, well, I mean, let's just imagine an EZ. The most basic form of an EZ, in my mind, would look like a flea market. It would be a bunch of, it would be, you know, an open building with a bunch of folding tables, and anyone who wants to can come in and rent a folding table and offer their goods or services for sale. What happens if one person is offering relaxing meditation sessions, and someone 2 tables down is offering drum lessons. There's a conflict there. And how do you mediate that conflict? And there needs to be some governance system to which all of the issues that will arise between, quirky individual human beings can be submitted to as a process for, to make sure that situations like that don't end up coming to blows, that there is a system in place for making for determinations about all of the infinitely, varied situations that could and would arise.
Yeah. So it seems like you're essentially trying to provide the tools for like recreating a new society from the ground up, essentially within like an already existing society. So like if 100 people get dropped off on an island, they can use this to restart society essentially.
Yeah, I would hope that it could be used on a desert island. I would also hope that it could be used in the middle of a burnt out industrial city, like in the heart of Detroit. There might be a dead zone where land is, can be had inexpensively because nobody's using it. And there's a huge number of people nearby who would benefit from having access to an alternative economic system where they can try to supplement, what might be a borderline economic existence through whatever form of employment they have in the traditional economy.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
My pleasure.
Samuel. Oh, Felix.
Yeah, I wanted to just comment on Professor Keane and the question from Edward Dodson. I have recently published a book on the idea of Silvio Gesell, and it's called How to Fulfill the UN Sustainability Goals, Rethinking the Role and Concept of Money in the Light of Sustainability. And because this topic of how money is created is so important and has always been discussed so heavily, I started the book with this topic. On chapter 2, I discussed the 2 ideas that we have since like 215 years. That since 250 years, central banks don't really know how money is created. There are 2 ideas. One idea is money creation out of nothing, and the other idea is money is created through credit expansion in the whole banking system. So there's 2 theories, and every 70 years there's one theory in vogue and then the other theory. And where does this come from? There's not enough time to discuss this in detail, but just let me say, in my opinion, the difference in the visions comes from the fact that the customer of banks who take out loans will get credited the loan on their cash account to the very same bank. So this is why there comes where this balance sheet expansion comes from. This is why why some people believe that banks create money out of nothing. But it's not the loan that makes this balance sheet expansion. It's the fact that the money is credited to the cash account at the very same bank. If the loan was lent out in cash and the customer would take the money and just take it away and it would not be credited to his cash account, then there would be no balance sheet expansion. In summary, banks do not create money out of nothing. Banks are intermediary, and the idea that banks create money out of nothing comes from the fact that it is credited to the cash account at the very same bank. So the credit customer is at the same time a loan taker, and so it's a debtor, and at the same time it's a creditor, because any cash account is a credit to the bank. This contradiction in the function of the customer makes the different views come about. We will now discuss this here in a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
but
very quickly, I disagree with that. The simple reason being that there are two ways we create money. They've always existed. Governments create money by expanding reserves and expanding deposits at the same time. Private banks create money by expanding loans and expanding deposits at the same time. The mechanics of that are quite complicated, and that again is why I highly recommend using Minsky to work through the logic, because once you see the accounting, I call Minsky the money telescope. Okay? It's like Galileo. He didn't win the argument by inventing the telescope because people who disagree with him refused to look down the telescope. Okay, when you look down the telescope, you see that the money telescope. You see there are two ways to create money, and they're not complementary. They can be in conflict, but they are in a sense they're independent, and that's what I think leads to a lot of the confusion. When you can do rapidly, in 15 minutes, I can lay out the monetary system of both a mixed credit and fiat system and show how they function using Minsky. And that's why I think take a look at it, see if your ideas hold up there. The mainstream ideas, none of them function. I regard mainstream economic theory as being like the Ptolemaic vision of the universe. With enough tweaks and bells and whistles, you can make it look like the solar system orbits the Earth. But when you look at it properly, we live in a sun-centric system. Same thing here. We have a mixed credit and fiat system. They both work through similar accounting structures, which combine the private sector and the government sector. I've got your chapter. I'll take a look at it anyway.
Can I intervene before you go, Marty? I want to raise another issue with Professor Keene on this.
Okay, I've got to go very soon. So that's
the issue is the allowing a bank or any entity to mark assets to market value and then use that increased valuation in order to borrow from a third party. That's my other thought about how a lot of this happens.
Yeah, that's basically the elasticity of a fiat credit money system. The one thing that worries me is that when we know that banks used to be able to hold shares, for example, and we banned that because of what happened during the Great Depression, because the act of banks lending money to people to buy shares actually drives up share prices, which then drove up the asset value of the banks, which enabled them to expand even further. And that was a large part of why the catastrophe of the Great Depression occurred, because when the stock market crash occurred, 10% of the asset side of banks was written off. The liabilities did not fall, so the equity had to fall instead, and a lot of them went bankrupt. So to make that impossible, we banned banks from buying shares, which is where the so-called merchant banking system has come from, and they're banks which aren't allowed to hold retail deposits. But I mean, they con their way around the system quite a bit sophisticated way. I think it's worth understanding that system. I see some people arguing that banks shouldn't be allowed to create money because that's where in the legal systems that say they've got that right. It is just literally the result of accounting. Once you have accounting, and once we regard deposit accounts of banks, which is what we start from, as being a form of money, and enabling people to do transactions by transferring liability to the banking sector, that's what makes it into money. So if you wanted to get rid of that, you need to get rid of private banks.
I didn't take that accounting course in my college education. Oh my, thank you.
Well, I didn't do accounting either at university. I regret, some ways I regret doing it, but I taught myself accounting fundamentally by first of all, building the predecessor to Minsky, and then realizing how important double entry is. And then you see the money nature of banking comes out of double entry bookkeeping. So people who want to ban private banks to some extent want to ban accounting, which is a bit silly. What you need to do is say, well, let's understand accounting and see what structure we need to mean the private sector can't create money, if you want to ban them from doing so. Any more questions for me? Because otherwise I'll have to disappear. That's it? Okay, bye everybody. Thank you for
Thank you
interesting
for
class.
Professor Green.
Okay, bye.
Great. Marty, we're gonna give you the last.
Yeah, I had a question for Josh, just or maybe a comment that to take the mystery out of what a governance system is or could be. I'd studied in my doctoral work the Ostrom principles for a common pool resource system, and so that's a type of governance system. But what's important in that is that there's 8 principles that all have to be working. You could have 7, but you're not going to get the effect. And I think with that give and take and people performing the various roles is how the governance system would work. I think Kate Rayworth has another type of system with her donut economy, and it could be used as a principles for a governance system. But I think if you wanted to work with me on that, I think I have some insights on how that governance system might work with a Gesell system.
Yeah, I would love that. I consider that part of the 3 elements of the kit the part that I have the least firm grasp on. That's not at all my area of expertise or experience. But like I said, the main thing is that I would want the governance piece of the kit to enable one easy in one location to choose pure democracy, and another easy in a different place in different circumstances to choose an absolute monarch, and for there to be, and for every gradation in between to be possible. So that would be, kind of my one guiding principle in terms of designing the governance part of the toolkit.
I think one of the things that's difficult is that people think of private sector, public sector being the dichotomy, but it's actually the false dichotomy that you actually have a third way of doing it, and that's the common pool or common property type of arrangement. And thing that I discovered when I studied Tampa and its water system is that it's a very conservative city, but they're cooperatively sharing water. And that's the thing that really was a light bulb for me, was irrespective of your political philosophy, when it comes down to doing something that makes sense, it can be sold.
Well, it would be wonderful if this, among other subjects, become fodder for what I mentioned at the top, that hopefully the Henry George School and the Silvio Gesell Foundation will collaborate on, which will be some other forum for exploration that is not a course, that is more conversation. And like I said, Ibrahim and I initiated a conversation about that. It seems like we're on similar pages. And so I'm excited that maybe that's the next chapter following this course.
Okay, thanks. Good job.
I don't see anybody, any hands raised anymore. So I'm assuming we don't have any questions or comments. So Josh, you wanted to make an announcement about where we go next, right?
No, I already addressed that in the presentation today.
Sounds good. So we look forward to see you again on another iteration of the Gesell course. It's not going to be quite this one, because based on the conversation that I had with Josh, we're going to open it more broadly and we'll have lots of guest speakers. So thank you very much for coming tonight and following through this course. I think it was very, very interesting. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And if you are in New York City or nearby, we do have an event on site at the Henry George School tomorrow at 6:30. So it's going to be about climate change. We'll have some art performance and some musical performance as well. So please join us if you can. Thank you very much, Josh. And thank you to Carlos and Felix. And I think Dr. King already left, but we were very happy to have you all tonight. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, Ibrahim.
Thank you. And I'll share Carlos's slides. I think it was on the chat, but in case you haven't seen it, I'll make sure you get it via email.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Perfect.